last year. I guess you know that.
2 is next.
I'm going back to Baghdad. I need Oman, I need Saudi Arabia, I need the White House, I need the Pentagon. Show it right now. We gotta get the book. Who is it? Baghdad right now.
Baghdad continues to be its target.
This area is under threat of imminent attack.
The RAF are taking off. You see a jet plane taking off right now.
Thinking about it right now, I think we should get... Okay, guys, break it down. Out of here. Move.
The first war in the last decade of the 20th century. A global audience of untold millions. A world eavesdropping from the highest councils to remote outposts. People were frozen in concentration, disbelief, wonderment. Fall and early winter of 1990 and 91. A dangerous time of firsts. The first play for power in the new post-Cold War era. A challenging test of extraordinary cooperation between the superpowers for the first time since they fought the Nazis. The United States and the Soviet Union, partners against one who would smash a fragile peace within the family of nations. The first time a nation would try to break out and become a regional superpower in the explosive Middle East. The first time in a century that one Arab country invaded another, Arab fighting Arab. The first test of America's armed forces with its new faces, including women close to the lines of battle. Western troops anticipating chemical and biological attacks for the first time since World War I. The maiden battlefield test of expensive and new computerized weaponry, including the Patriot missile, canonized as the war's first hero. And for the United States, the first war since Vietnam, and the most popular one among Americans since the Second World War.
I want there to be no misunderstanding. I will hold the government of Iraq responsible for the safety and well-being of American citizens held against their will.
Will going to be a bloody conflict, and America will lose, and America will be humiliated.
Hello, I'm Bernard Shaw. Human beings on this planet began the last decade of the 20th century with hope. The guns of war were silent. Iran and Iraq, exhausted by 8 years of fighting, had staggered to a peace each side could live with. Relations between Moscow and Washington had so thawed that people dared to believe the Cold War was over. Freedom and reform were rolling across Eastern Europe. Everywhere, barriers were falling. Suddenly, profoundly, there was war in the Gulf. What went wrong? On this most ancient of battlefields, war exploded, triggered by contentions over oil, driven by grievances colonial powers imposed, and assured by a world searching for order, a world refusing to watch a militarily strong nation impose its will on a weak neighbor. Thus, this story of leaders, warriors, historic hatreds, and the strategy surrounding the Gulf crisis that became the Gulf War. natives say the sky literally changes in summertime, becoming dull and lifeless. One Washington wit describes it as the color of television tuned to a dead channel. At a time of year when heat and humidity slow the federal government and drive up the murder rate, this first day of August 1990 is unbelievably wonderful. 85 degrees, humidity only 36%. Barely a hint of the storm to come. The talk on the street was of Mayor Marion Barry smoking crack and first dog Millie getting lead poison. At the highest levels of government, the most important issue seemed not to be the S&L bailout or the new civil rights bill or even the end of the Cold War. No, on this warm Wednesday in August, topping the agenda, getting out of town. Like so many others in the United States Capitol, President Bush was looking forward to vacationing on the shores of New England. But first, a typical day of political wrangling and photo opportunities. The battle over a new budget would end this day in stalemate. The 41st president retires to the family quarters on the 3rd floor of the White House, unaware he would soon be facing the biggest gamble of his political career. At approximately 8 p.m., an aide delivers an urgent message from the White House Situation Room. Iraq has invaded Kuwait.
We have some drama unfolding in the Middle East to report to you tonight. Diplomats in Kuwait are now saying that Iraqi troops have crossed the border into Kuwait.
As the president follows the latest reports from CNN and the CIA, the signs grow more ominous. Soviet-built Iraqi tanks rumble through the Kuwaiti capital. One member of the royal family is killed. The rest, including the emir, are forced to escape to safety in Saudi Arabia.
Well, I'm sitting here overlooking the American embassy and the palace of the emir. We hear continuous small arms shooting from that area.
The entire Gulf has been it's been greatly shocked by
Revolutionary Command Council on Thursday is announcing that the Kuwaiti government has been overthrown.
Masterminding the invasion is a dictator whose strength has inspired the dreams of the disenfranchised and terrified the rich and powerful throughout the Arab world. Saddam Hussein, president of Iraq and leader of the world's 4th largest army, 1 million men under arms. Saddam. In Arabic, it means one who confronts. The one who confronted Kurdish rebels with chemical death. One who confronted his political rivals with torture and the point of a gun. Confronted his eastern neighbor, Ayatollah Khomeini, in an 8-year war that killed hundreds of thousands of Iranians and equal numbers of his own countrymen. Parts of his nation were in ruins, the economy in shambles. And now, the one who confronts turns his attention to his rich Arab cousins to the south. Kuwait, a jewel box slightly smaller than New Jersey. It has been called Kuwait Inc., a snide term to many, but to Kuwaitis, their staggering wealth and the clever way they invested it is a badge of pride. Kuwait was among the poorest of nations until oil started flowing in 1946. Now, Kuwait's portfolio of international assets is nearly $100 billion. The source? 94.5 billion barrels of oil beneath the sand, enough for more than a century of production. The world's 3rd largest proven petroleum reserves. But relatively scanty defenses to protect the ruling Sabah family. There are more than 500,000 Bedouin tribesmen and wards and 1.5 million others. There is much to protect. Though some outsiders live in squalor, Kuwaiti citizens have it made. Free housing, telephones, education, medical care. The streets are lined with Mercedes, and everywhere the glint of gold, the smell of crude. All of this is tantalizing to Saddam and irritating. In a region where envy is as big a product as oil, Kuwait symbolizes the growing rift between the haves and the have-nots in the Arab world, between the proud forces of Arab nationalism and the bitter legacy of European colonialism. Following the First World War, victorious Europeans carved up their Middle Eastern enemy, the Ottoman Empire, recklessly slicing through tribal areas and traditional routes of commerce dating back before the time of Muhammad. Among the lines arbitrarily drawn in the sand were Kuwait's borders with its deep-water port and 2 small islands. What had once been Mesopotamia was now Iraq. From the start, envious of its neighbors' access to the Persian Gulf. Stolen, says Iraq, were the 2 islands needed for a deep-water shipping port and part of an oil field known as Rumallah.
Now, in the light of Iraq's territorial claims, a British
in 1961,
commando air carrier is
Iraq celebrated Kuwait's independence from Britain by threatening to invade. But British troops kept the peace, the first of several gunpoint border disputes, the first of many small irritations that would shape a relationship of confrontation between these 2 Arab countries. These times would shape a new leader in the Arab world, the one who confronts Saddam. Ironically, it would be the money and arms and political support of his future enemies that would also help change Saddam Hussein from local strongman to leader of a regional power armed with some of the world's most devastating weapons worth more than $50 billion. Saddam Hussein's weapons were financed, perhaps inadvertently in some cases, with loans sanctioned by the United States, Saudi Arabia, and yes, even by Kuwait. Kuwait loaned Iraq about $32 billion to help fight the war against Iran. And now the emirs wanted some of their money back. But Iraq, with an $80 billion war debt, had a different point of view. Saddam saw the Kuwaitis as ingrates. He had borne the cost of protecting his Arab neighbors from the Ayatollah's fundamentalist regime. Iraq said Kuwait had stolen nearly $2.5 billion worth of oil from its Rumallah oil fields, siphoning it off by slanting drills into Iraqi oil. Iraq also complained that Kuwait had been one of the oil cartel members exceeding OPEC production limits, helping to drive down the price of oil from $20.50 a barrel in the opening days of 1990 to a mere $13.60 a barrel by summer. The drop of each dollar in the price of oil meant $1 billion less for Iraq. The one who confronts swore he would stop Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates from continuing to depress oil prices. Saddam Hussein issued an angry warning. The oil quota violators have stabbed Iraq with a poison dagger. Iraqis will not forget the saying that cutting necks is better than cutting means of living. O God Almighty, be witness that we have warned them. Warnings? Miscues? Missed signals? How much did President Bush know of the crisis to come? And when did he know it? The White House and State Department are silent. But the intelligence community is tracking unexpected troop movements inside Iraq by satellite. This much is known to all. In the months leading up to his invasion of Kuwait, Hussein is caught trying to import components of triggering switches for nuclear bombs. A British journalist is hanged. A threat is made to destroy half of Israel with chemical weapons. July 16th, a meeting of the Arab League. Iraq's foreign minister warns Kuwait and other Arab states, our country will not kneel. As Iraqi rhetoric grows more shrill, cables from the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad show little concern about Saddam Hussein's intentions. The White House remains quiet. July 18th. Baghdad radio broadcasts a letter from the Iraqi foreign minister to the Arab League, charging Kuwait with systematically, deliberately, and continuously harming Iraq by encroaching on its territory, stealing its oil, and destroying its economy. Such behavior, it says, amounts to military aggression. July 20th. Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Aarons meets with U.S. Defense Secretary Dick Cheney to show evidence that Iraq is bracing for war. July 23rd. U.S. intelligence satellites confirmed at least 30,000 Iraqi troops are on the Kuwaiti border. But on July 24th, the State Department spells out Washington's policy on Kuwait.
I happen to know if the United States has any commitment to Kuwait to defend Kuwait or to assist it against aggression.
We do not have any defense treaties with Kuwait, and there are no special defense or security commitments to Kuwait.
July 25th. Saddam Hussein calls in the U.S. ambassador to Iraq, April Glaspie. He assures her he will not invade Kuwait, and Glaspie, on orders from Washington to pursue quiet diplomacy, states, "We have no opinion on the Arab-Arab conflicts, like your border disagreement with Kuwait." She tells President Hussein that President Bush wants, quote, better and deeper relations with Iraq. Months later, Glaspie would tell Congress the transcript of the July meeting was maliciously edited by the Iraqis, becoming, quote, disinformation and fabrication. Not all in Congress were satisfied.
Did you ever tell Saddam Hussein, Mr. President, if you go across that line into Kuwait, we're going to fight?
No, I did not.
You did not tell him that?
Absolutely not.
And yet
I told him
you think he believed that?
I certainly do. I told him we would defend our vital interests. He complained to me for 1 hour about fleet movements and American neo-imperialism and militarism. He knew perfectly well what we were talking about, and it would have been absolutely wrong for me, without consulting with the president, to inform anybody of a change in our policy. Our policy was that we would defend our vital interests. Up to the president to decide how we would do it. Saddam Hussein, who is a man who lives by the sword, believed that we were going to do it by the sword.
August 1st. At a White House meeting, the CIA says in its early morning briefing that an invasion is 70% likely within the next 24 hours. By midday, the CIA revises the estimate up to 90%. At 6 p.m. Washington time, Iraqi troops cross the border into Kuwait.
Full control of the military situation in Kuwait, the nation they invaded, in a dispute over borders and oil production.
The UN Security Council has been working all night on a resolution to condemn Iraq. The White House says the U.S. is deeply concerned about this blatant act of aggression and demands the immediate and unconditional withdrawal of all Iraqi forces. And while visiting
the United States is trying to deal with this crisis rationally, calmly. U.S. officials, senior U.S. officials, have been up all night monitoring the situation in the Situation Room at the White House.
Do you contemplate intervention as one of your options?
We're not discussing intervention. I would not discuss any military options, even if we'd agreed upon them.
Later, the president would recall he made an almost instantaneous judgment that the United States must intervene. For now, the only judgment expressed is a strong rebuke of Saddam.
The United States strongly condemns the Iraqi military invasion of Kuwait. Needless to say, we view this situation with the utmost gravity. We remain committed to take whatever steps are necessary to defend our long-standing vital interests in the Gulf.
In the language of governments and diplomats, vital interests in the Gulf translates oil. And now, by occupying Kuwait, Saddam Hussein controlled 19% of the Earth's oil reserves and another 25% within reach just across the border in Saudi Arabia.
Being on the rampage, assaulting and even raping women and children.
Many of them ransacked or burnt houses. He was reportedly shot and killed by Iraqi soldiers as he tried to flee to Saudi Arabia.
As the White House debates its options, the human toll is rising.
Homes that had been set on fire, cars on the road.
And George Bush would later call it Saddam Hussein's rape of Kuwait.
There was a woman and a small girl and a man who was on the ground, had his hands cuffed behind his back. It was her husband. They raped the woman and the child. Then they shot the man in the head.
The Iraqis dunked his head into a swimming pool until he almost drowned. They pulled out his fingernails and applied electric shock to sensitive private parts of his body. He was lucky to survive.
Last week there was a mass execution of 21 university professors.
It is a normal Iraqi practice to arbitrarily arrest 50 to 75 Kuwaitis each afternoon and throw them into the jails in each neighborhood, where they are tortured and humiliated and urinated on and forced to consume their own feces. They are interrogated, and if the soldiers do not like what they say, they shoot them. They took the babies out of the incubators. Took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor.
Iraq will not be permitted to annex Kuwait. And that's not a threat, it's not a boast, it's just the way it's going to be.
Mr. Bush, ladies and gentlemen, is sending your sons to a war which has no human value or meaning.
An extraordinary multinational military force. $690,000 troops from 28 countries. Many with competing interests, conflicting goals, until now. Now, united against Saddam Hussein.
The fact is that it is not the United States against Iraq. It is Iraq against the world.
Initially, the president responds cautiously to the invasion of Kuwait, freezing Iraq's assets, and protectively Kuwait's.
Anything you want to go?
What's going on in the Gulf?
Any new developments?
No, I had a long talk with King Fahd just now.
What do you want?
Well, we're just reviewing options, and he's going to have some meetings over there.
British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher advocates going a step further, bolstering the design for what would become U.S. policy in the Gulf.
None of us can do it separately. We need a collective and effective will.
With the commitment of British support, the president starts lining up the multinational effort to stop Saddam.
Mr. President, how can you and other world leaders prevent the installation of what you've termed a puppet government?
Just wait. Watch and learn.
He works the phones with a personal style honed during a career as a congressman, CIA director, ambassador to China and the United Nations, and as vice president. Now, with a crisis in the Gulf, Bush dispatches Secretary of State James Baker to help cement the coalition of nations opposing Saddam. Military, economic, political promises are made. Within days, President Bush has forged an unprecedented international alliance. After initial reluctance to speak out, 14 of the 21 members of the Arab League vote against Iraq. With new bite from the cooperating superpowers, the United Nations Security Council unanimously approves mandatory economic sanctions against Iraq. The United States and Soviet governments issue a joint statement against Iraq.
We take the unusual step of jointly calling upon the rest of the international community to join with us in an international cutoff of all arms supplies to Iraq.
The Soviet Union's support is crucial. Moscow had been one of Iraq's chief suppliers of military equipment. Its military advisors were still in Baghdad, when Soviet-built tanks led the invasion of Kuwait. As the crisis grows more complex, President Bush is determined to maintain an appearance before the cameras, an appearance of business and pleasure as usual.
Yes.
He vacations in Maine.
Have you talked to the White House Situation Room yet, sir?
I talk to him every morning at 5:30, and I'm not going to make any more comments up here, though.
Meanwhile, Saddam Hussein cultivates his own television image. Several thousand U.S., British, and other nationals in Kuwait and Iraq are held hostage. Guests, Saddam calls them.
I need 1 minute. Are you getting your milk, Stuart? And with cornflakes, too.
He tells the world that some will be sent to military and industrial sites in Iraq, human shields, to deter a potential attack. Bush also addresses the world.
4 simple principles guide our policy. First, we seek the immediate, unconditional, and complete withdrawal of all Iraqi forces from Kuwait.
The restoration of Kuwait's legitimate government, the stability of Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf, and American citizens abroad must be protected.
A 5th objective soon emerges.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order.
A new world order born out of the end of the Cold War and the death of universal communist rule in Eastern Europe. Born, too, out of fears that history might repeat itself.
As was the case in the 1930s, we see in Saddam Hussein an aggressive dictator threatening his neighbors.
Bush, a veteran of World War II. At age 18, the youngest pilot in the Navy. 58 combat missions before he was shot down and rescued in the Pacific.
Half a century ago, our nation and the world paid dearly for appeasing an aggressor who should and could have been stopped, and we're not about to make that same mistake twice.
But convincing other countries with their own agendas requires maximum diplomatic finesse. Japan, far more dependent on Middle Eastern oil than the United States, initially offers $10 million to help hundreds of thousands of refugees pouring out of Iraq into camps, lacking adequate food and sanitation. Japan eventually raises its pledge to $13 billion, money for the military confrontation. Syria, the U.S. State Department called it a sponsor of terrorism.
We are not embracing Syria and everything that Syria has done, with which we disagree. We will continue to disagree.
But now, Syria's president, Hafez al-Assad, becomes a valued member of the coalition. And despite the image of superpower harmony, Bush and Gorbachev disagree over linking the future of the Palestinians to an Iraqi withdrawal from Kuwait.
It seems to me that there is a link here.
But the thing that I feel strongly about is that these issues are not linked.
President Bush presses on. At the United Nations, he speaks of life after the Cold War, of a new world order.
A partnership based on consultation, cooperation, and collective action. I see a world of open borders, open trade, and most importantly, open minds.
But Bush's vision of a peaceful future is challenged by the political messiness of the present.
No war now! No war now!
Despite his pledge to promote democracy, critics charge the president is going to war to protect oil, to protect rich autocratic monarchies. And just before the shooting starts, The more cooperative Kremlin takes a page from old Soviet regimes, ordering in troops and tanks against Lithuania's independence movement, killing at least 12 people. Clearly, there is disorder in the New World Order, so much so that a historic coalition of armies is assembled in the Middle East. They would find out if their political success, agreeing on a common cause, could be duplicated in battle.
Today, I am more determined than ever in my life. This aggression will not and must not stand. We're dealing with Hitler revisited, a totalitarianism and a brutality that is naked and unprecedented in modern times.
The bombs, the rockets, the missiles would not fall for months. Nor would there be the bloodshed from Desert Storm for months. Would Iraq's President Saddam Hussein permit words diplomacy to coax him back across his border, back from war's brink to avoid the showdown? While the new coalition opposing him hoped and worked for peace, the coalition prepared for war.
I'm disturbed because my life has changed. But I just keep praying and wish for a safe return when it's all over.
For the sailors, airmen, Marines, soldiers, and their families, the hell of war comes long before any shots are fired.
I just think the Navy shouldn't let daddies go away this long, but still, they have to keep the world safe.
You're a great Navy family. God bless you all, and farewell.
It is gut-wrenching, leaving the family's warm bosom. Loving security one day, danger the next. Paratroopers from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, were the first to say fast goodbyes. In darkness, they hurried to answer the president's call on the night of August 7th. Within 24 hours, the harsh Saudi desert was their new home.
The mission of our troops is wholly defensive.
Open it up, gun two down.
Hopefully, they will not be needed long.
But the training at America's military bases intensified as thousands more men and women got in shape to ship out.
Let's go, inside. Good luck, all the way up.
Forward, march, left,
Right,
left,
on.
left.
Reserve units were activated, the first time since the 1968 Vietnam Tet Offensive. Doctors, lawyers, ministers, transformed from what many called weekend warriors to full-timers.
Face to your right. Forward. Ha!
Within 3 months, 180,000 GIs. Hundreds of aircraft, hundreds more tanks, and billions of pounds of equipment in place in Saudi Arabia. It was the fastest deployment in United States history and the largest since Vietnam.
Anything you all want to know? If I don't know the answer, I'll just make it up.
One of the chief architects, Stormin Norman, H. Norman Schwarzkopf, has that nickname because he throws things when he's angry enough. But this four-star general is also known for his IQ of 170. 2 years ago, he created a contingency plan based on this premise. One Arab country would attack another, forcing America into war. The plan laid out specifics for U.S. troop deployment. After Iraq invaded Kuwait, General Schwarzkopf reached for his plan and presented it. A key reason America was able to respond almost immediately.
There was never any doubt in my mind that we were going to get air superiority very quickly. We were going to control the air, but what I needed was tank killers in here. So now I got the tank killers in here, and I got the people that are going to maintain them and keep them flying, and we're all feeling a lot better about the situation. Let's face it, if he dares come across that border and come down here, I'm completely confident that we're going to kick his butt when he gets here, and it's going to be because of you folks right here. We can, 90.
Selling the plan was the mission of Stormin Norman's two bosses, General Colin Powell, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Dick Cheney, Secretary of Defense. Powell, the first black and the youngest man to rise to the nation's highest military post, had been a national security advisor to President Reagan.
I'd like to see this thing solved peacefully. We've got no desire to go out and hurt a bunch of Iraqis. We've got no desire to get any of our folks hurt.
The New York-born son of Jamaican immigrants calls himself just a foot soldier. Some say he's more than that. Maybe a vice president one day.
If hostilities begin, there's only one possible outcome that's acceptable, and that's absolute total victory.
Cheney, a proven politician, was chief of staff for President Ford. In the House of Representatives, he was Republican whip. Powell and Cheney stood behind the president's decision to send troops immediately, lots of troops. America's arsenal of might was rolled out.
We would be using capabilities that were far more lethal, far more accurate, and far more effective than anything we have ever used before.
Some of America's new high-tech weaponry had never been battle-tested. The Tomahawk cruise missile fired from the sea. Manufacturers said it could travel from Boston Harbor to RFK Stadium in Washington and pass through the goalposts. But with lives on the line, would it score every time? Or the Patriot, the anti-missile missile. Could it take on and destroy a Soviet-built Scud?
Okay, now you can see the big picture there where the range is. I'm going to scale down. I'm going to freeze that map.
Or would sophisticated computers and radar aboard America's wide array of fighters and bombers hold up after thousands of sorties? On paper, the Abrams tank is the world's finest. Equipped with chemical and biological protection for the crew and ammunition capable of penetrating the Iraqi tanks. But could the Abrams be stopped by fine desert sand? The Army's Apache helicopter, fast, accurate, can fight at night and in bad weather. But delicate sensors in its nose had never been exposed to desert heat every day. The foot soldiers are equipped with an improved M16 rifle with twice the range of the Iraqis' AK-47 and twice as many parts. Sand could be a problem.
Right, talk to me!
A most important unknown, the men and women who would be operating all this destructive equipment. Well-trained, but few had tasted battle. They would face an army of 1 million, thousands of tanks and thousands of artillery pieces, chemical weapons, and above all, veterans of the Iran-Iraq War.
I want peace, not war. But if there must be war, we will not permit our troops to have their hands tied behind their backs.
The Commander-in-Chief's assurances had a pumping up effect, and without the first sign of death, the nation burst into patriotic fervor not felt or expressed since World War II.
We cannot allow any dictator ruler to ruthlessly invade another country and torture and kill its inhabitants. There's a danger of non-involvement, of apathy.
We are running out of these. I've been trying on the phone all day trying to get more of them. There seems to be a lot of support.
Patriotism became as commercialized as Christmas. Despite a recession, people were buying, and manufacturers of war keepsakes couldn't seem to meet the national demand. But as the weeks passed, popularity polls showed a steady drop in the president's ratings. The adrenaline surge was over. Americans pondered the horrors of war. Rapid sales of gas masks in surplus stores, a sign of growing fears of terrorism.
You got your mask, you may be a survivor.
And Americans felt sorrow for the thousands of families split up by the sudden call to arms. The Petersons, both in the military, had to leave their 17-month-old son behind.
For a mother to leave her child, it's one of the hardest things to do.
No, he's waving goodbye. Come here, babies. Come on. Come on, babies. Come on.
I had a problem after kids grew up and got grown. I had a problem hauling in 1,000 bales of hay, putting up in yonder, you know.
Yeah, but no, you're not here. I do all these things myself.
In Clay County, Alabama, Monroe and Flossie Wood watched as 8 family members went off to war.
You know, sometimes something that's come across my mind, and it tells me that you're not gonna see your children anymore.
The patriotic spirit in this rural county, with its monument to fallen soldiers of past wars, was strained as never before.
You got to look after each other. So please take care of your buddy.
The president's November call-up was for 100,000 more GIs, changing America's military stance from defensive to offensive. The shield was now becoming a sword.
It ain't worth it. It ain't worth the life of one of my boys. Well, I'll get killed for the oil. Let them have it.
I don't understand because of the fighting, if it does happen to fighting over the oil. But right now, I don't think we should be there. But if they call, then I have to support the military.
Good night. No. Won't be tonight.
Got to have my baby with me.
He took Billy away from me with the Lionel unit, and then Daddy and Uncle Leon and John David and all them away this time. You'll get through, baby.
How you doing?
Okay. I just want him to be here.
National Guard units headed out from Clay County with Thanksgiving and Christmas just ahead.
It's like you're just going through the motions. You can't, you hear Christmas songs and you think of the past Christmases, and it's just real special for families.
Good luck to you, fellas. Good luck. Good to see all of you.
The president worked to boost morale and underscore resolve. He spent Thanksgiving with the troops. His approval rating had sagged to its lowest level since Iraq invaded Kuwait.
People at home say, we don't need more Vietnam. That's right. There won't be any.
anybody's asked to fight, they're going to fight and win.
Some politicians, sensing America's new concerns, reacted to the president's call-up of additional troops with anger. They argued the president was sending the nation to war without the consent of Congress, an unconstitutional act.
If anything is clear about the Constitution, it is that, as Abraham Lincoln said, the Constitution was written precisely to ensure that no one man should hold the power of bringing this oppression upon us.
We ought to send a clear signal here that there's a willingness and a resolve to threaten the use of force in a credible way.
And in the street,
What do we want? When do we want it now?
what had been small outbursts of anti-war feelings grew larger. Still the minority, but now a factor in the public debate over how far the country should go.
No blood for oil! No blood for oil! No blood for oil! 1, 2, 3, 4! We don't want your bloody war! 5, 6, 7, 8! We will not cooperate! What do we want? Where's the guns? What are you guys burning the flag for? You don't like this country? Get the hell out! I'll fight you down. This is our country too. When do we want it? Now! When do we want it? When do we want it? Now!
What right do we have to go into another country, put troops there and say, yes, we are the guardians of freedom. We are guarding our economic interests.
We are there for peace. We are there because peace has got to be done at all costs.
Hey, hey, ho, ho, George Bush has got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho, George Bush has got to go.
The president tried to allay the country's fears by vowing the crisis in the Gulf would never become another Vietnam. But in Congress, not everyone was convinced.
To those of us for whom Vietnam remains much more than just a distant memory, there are analogies which create deep-seated doubts over the apparent willingness of this administration's rush to war.
If we show a lack of resolve, this Congress will be sending the wrong message to the world, which could encourage others to copy what Hussein has done.
In dedicating the battlefield at Gettysburg, our greatest Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, said, "We here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain." President Bush cannot make that statement if he goes to war on the indefensible timetable he has set.
We have the power to declare war. What we do not have is the power to make war. The President, ladies and gentlemen, must be able to deal with foreign hostilities with a free hand.
In a close vote,
The yeas are 52, and the nays are 47.
the president's action would ultimately be endorsed. America listened, analyzed, agonized, and prayed. The deadline for war approached. Americans beat back the ghost of Vietnam and zeroed in on Saddam Hussein. Defeating him would be worth the bloody battle, provided the fight is quick and the casualties low.
Question is, are we just going to fight in Kuwait, or are we going to level Baghdad? No comment.
Mr. Saddam Hussein, you must simply do what the world is calling upon you to do. Get out.
saw and heard the war begin outside the windows of the Al Rashid Hotel, there was only one thing on my mind, and that was to tell the world what was going on. CNN had set up the communications, we had the personnel, and my job was to report what it was like being in the eye of the hurricane. I spent the next hours and the next days trying to deliver on that commitment to tell the whole world through CNN what it was like to be the target of the military forces of the whole world.
The first few seconds were absolutely as scary as anything on earth could be. But as soon as I realized we were going to have an opportunity to do this story and get on television with the story, it became like describing any sort of an outdoor event, from the 4th of July fireworks on the Mall in Washington, D.C., to a football game almost. I mean, you watched the bombs come down and you were able to say, this one came down over here, this one came down over there. And it was so exciting when we realized we actually had an audience for what we were going to do, and maybe we weren't going to be killed, that it became one of the most exciting and scintillating experiences I had ever had as a reporter.
When you have the fear of anticipating what might happen, will there be war, won't there be war? When you see in the skies speckles of yellow, orange, green, red, when you hear air raid sirens going off, when you see anti-aircraft guns just outside your hotel window and also on the opposite side of the hotel, when you see those going off, when you hear confusion in the streets below, when you hear bombs going off and seeing bright flashes, when you realize that you are trapped, you cannot go anywhere, and people are rushing to bomb shelters in the very hotel where you're staying, my conclusion is that is the center of hell.
Go! Do it! Put it on the air!
We got an attack here. I guess you know that.
Camera 2 is next. It is
now going back to Baghdad.
I need Oman, I need Saudi Arabia, I need the White House, I need the Pentagon.
Don't interrupt us. We got to get the point.
Who is it? Baghdad right now.
Baghdad continues to be its target.
This area is under threat of imminent attack.
That are on the ramp are taking off. I can see a jet plane taking off right now.
Thinking about it right now, I think we should get it. Okay, guys, break it down. Out of here. Move.
August 2nd, 1990. Iraqi tanks rumble across the border into Kuwait. Tiny, oil-rich. Invasion. Sounds of a distant storm in the Persian Gulf. A regional tyrant with grand ambitions, backed by the world's 4th largest army. Iraq's Saddam Hussein. In Arabic, it means one who confronts. Soon he will face the most powerful coalition of armed might ever assembled. To this most ancient of battlefields comes the most advanced weaponry and the best trained warriors of 28 nations. Saddam and his men, the targets. It is called Operation Desert Shield, a shield that would become a sword. Hello, I'm Bernard Shaw. It was autumn of 1990. The invasion of Kuwait was weeks old, and the world braced for news of more trouble. Would Iraq's President Saddam Hussein permit words, diplomacy to coax him back across his border, back from war's brink to avoid the showdown? The new coalition forged by President George Bush worked and hoped for peace, but prepared for war. January 11th, Secretary of State James Baker with Air Force pilots in Saudi Arabia. The U.S.-led coalition is war ready. So are these pilots. Ready to test their cunning, courage, and their aircraft.
We passed the break at midnight on January 15th.
And after the deadline, then what?
You will not have to wait much longer for an answer to that question.
But there's another question, not easily answered. How could diplomacy succeed building an international coalition, mounting a naval blockade?
The draft resolution has been adopted.
And passing a dozen UN Security Council resolutions against Iraq, but failed to prevent war.
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, we will now put the draft resolution to the vote.
On November 29th, the UN Security Council authorizes the use of force if Iraq does not withdraw by January 15th. Only the second such vote in the UN's 45-year history. With Trump card now in hand, President Bush makes a surprise offer. Face-to-face talks with Baghdad.
I am not suggesting discussions that will result in anything less than Iraq's complete withdrawal from Kuwait, restoration of Kuwait's legitimate government, and freedom for all hostages.
The same day, Iraqi soldiers deliver food to the beleaguered U.S. Embassy in Kuwait after cutting off food, water, and power months earlier. 89 small bruised apples, 45 tangerines, 80 oranges, cucumbers, 155 of them, and 1 case of cigarettes. And 6 days later, Iraq's president announces he will release the remaining hostages. Tearful reunions, and the world wonders. Is Saddam signaling he might also compromise on Kuwait? But the two sides can't agree on a date for talks. Bush had initially suggested any time before the UN January 15th deadline. But when Saddam insists on January 12th, the White House says no. 3 days wouldn't leave enough time for Iraq to pull its troops out.
Saddam Hussein is not too busy to see on short notice Kurt Waldheim, Billy Brandt, Muhammad Ali, Ted Keith, John Connolly, Ramsey Clark, and many, many others on very short notice. And it simply is not credible that he cannot, over a 2-week period, make a couple of hours available for the Secretary of State on an issue of this importance.
Finally, the breakthrough. Secretary of State James Baker and Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz will meet in Geneva on January 9th.
Good morning,
Is there really any chance to avoid a war? The unresolved issues are formidable. Not only the future of Kuwait, but also Iraq's weapons of mass destruction and the question of Israel's 25-year occupation of Palestinian land. Making talks more difficult, the atmosphere is inflamed with rhetoric.
It is Saddam Hussein who lied to his Arab neighbors. It was a ruthless assault.
2 weeks ago, I made mention of the Nuremberg trials.
The world will hold him accountable.
What we are looking at is good and evil, right and wrong.
In Baghdad, the rhetoric is equally tough, as Saddam appeals to Arabs and the Muslim world with personal attacks on Bush. The talks in Geneva bring a temporary ceasefire in the war of words, but nothing to prevent the bombs and bullets. Baker and Aziz begin with a handshake. News photographers ask for this pose. The talks are calm, direct, intense. A last-ditch peace effort. But after 6.5 hours of anxious talk...
Regrettably, ladies and gentlemen, I heard nothing today that, in over 6 hours, I heard nothing that suggested to me any Iraqi flexibility whatsoever on complying with the United Nations Security Council resolutions.
Iraq insists, as it has since August, any withdrawal from Kuwait must be linked to the Palestinian issue. Again, the United States refuses linking the two issues, insisting that rewards Iraq's aggression.
And is it your conclusion after this meeting that war with the United States is inevitable?
Well, that's up to the American administration to decide.
With the Geneva talks talked out, embassies in Baghdad begin evacuating their personnel. Hospitals prepare for casualties. Anti-war protests continue across the United States. But public opinion polls show 62% approving military force to get Iraq out of Kuwait, up 20 points since the crisis began. Hope for an 11th hour peace rests with UN Secretary General Javier Pérez de Cuellar. He had gone to Baghdad in September and returned empty-handed. After this last meeting on January 13th, he is asked, will there be war?
It is something which only you believe God, only God knows.
Only God. Only George Bush. Only Saddam Hussein. Pérez de Cuellar makes a last personal appeal on January 15th, the UN deadline. Saddam does not reply. The sabers had rattled long enough. The peacemakers were talked out. The combat forces were dug in, well-honed, ready to fight. And the war clouds that had been forming over the Gulf for months were finally about to break. In the opening weeks of the new year, CNN correspondents Pete Arnett, John Holloman, and I waited in Baghdad for the terrible drama to unfold. January 16th, 1991. It was time for what President George Bush would call a just war, and President Saddam Hussein would call the mother of all battles. The Saudi desert's emptiness is matched by the aching loneliness of men and women severed from their families by duty. Pass. The waiting causes as much anguish as fear of the enemy.
Every now and then, you know, you get an empty feeling in your stomach or something like that. Think all kinds of things. Everything runs through your mind. Your family, your friends, you know, your girlfriend. What's going to happen if you die?
Roger, be advised, you have 3. I say again, 3. T-55. Heading your direction.
Take that forward, take the top through side.
Long hours of practice and preparation help pass the time and boost confidence.
We suck in that gut, and we have that pride. We got to buy that pride. We got to pay for it. We pay for it by being the nation's elite expeditionary force.
I think they better start doing something. I want to see action. I'm sick of talk. I've heard talk for ever since we landed here.
We've been here long enough and tired of waiting. Ready to go. The sooner we go, the sooner we get home.
Recreation eases the strain. mind drifts to tender moments and the unmistakable magnetism of home.
We hear the pity pats of home and kids running around the street. Mr. Softly. We hear our families calling us.
You kind of miss out on everything, but then you got something also to look forward to. The day that you get home, where you'll pick up where you left off.
You're inside the circle at 5:30.
While these fighters and their machines practice in desert heat, they are unaware of the Black Hole, a place in Riyadh where top military men secretly plot to free Kuwait. Armed with satellite data and top-secret information from spy missions into Iraq, carefully they choose military targets. In the desert, in the cities, in the war rooms and newsrooms around the world, there are small but mounting signs of the storm to come. At the White House, hundreds of new computers, printers, and fax machines arrive to augment one of Washington's nerve centers. Pizzas, a quick solution to missed meals and long hours, delivered to the Pentagon by the boxload, 10 times the normal order. And on the somber side, 10,000 more body bags issued to the front lines, pushing the total to 44,000.
From our reporting position, I can barely see the streets, barely see them. There's this extraordinarily thick and eerie fog choking the city. I cannot see, but I can feel. I feel tension and I feel hope in Baghdad.
We come here together to pray for a miracle, to pray to bring the boys home.
My thoughts are with my husband and his men and the other men and women who are over in the area now.
In the midst of conflict and division, we know it is you who turn our minds to thoughts of peace.
Something is happening outside. The skies over Baghdad have been illuminated. We're seeing bright flashes going off all over the sky.
The liberation of Kuwait has begun.
There are sounds of planes overhead. We don't know whose planes there are, but air raid sirens are going off consistently. There are military convoys on both sides of me. We're being told to get off this platform and get inside into the air raid shelter immediately. But right now, everyone's been training for this, and it looks like we may have...
All right, Charles Jaco, that doesn't mean that he is in any imminent danger. Of course, we can't know that. He does have a place of shelter to which to go, and that's where we believe he is going. He is well equipped and cared for. We're going now back to Baghdad and our reporters at the Rashid Hotel.
We can hear explosions off in the distance to the west of central Baghdad, and we don't know how far to the west, but I can put the microphone out the window and maybe we'll get to hear some of the sounds of these explosions just for a moment, or at least the anti-aircraft fire that is going with them.
CNN becomes the eyes and ears of the world, using an old-fashioned four-wire telephone. Peter Arnett, John Holloman, and I describe the Allied bombing from our foxhole, room 906 of Baghdad's Al Rashid Hotel.
Think, John, that airburst took out the telecommunications. Yeah. Now you may hear the bombs now. If you're still with us, you're going to hear the bombs now. They are hitting the center of this city.
Against military targets in Iraq. We are determined to knock out Saddam Hussein's nuclear bomb potential. We will also destroy his chemical weapons facilities. Much of Saddam's artillery and tanks will be destroyed.
Just one comment. Clearly, I've never been there, but this feels like we're in the center of hell.
The Allied aerial armada takes off on a moonless, clear night from carriers in the Persian Gulf and Red Sea, and from bases in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain.
It's kind of scary to think what damage we're going to be doing and how many lives we're going to be taking. It's kind of scary.
Pilots and crews sense the terror of impending battle. Only 5% of the American pilots have had any combat experience. But they are the best trained aviators in history, and confidence outraces fear. EF-111 Raven jets are the first into Iraq, cruising the border, jamming enemy radar.
They're seeing jamming, now their scope is blanked, so they're getting wide strobes across it, and they know something is coming forward towards them, but they can't pick out the targets.
Then, 8 Apache helicopters, their pilots wearing $10,000 night vision goggles, destroy radar sites to clear a path to Baghdad.
I see more and more airbursts. It looks like there are 100 fireflies off in the southwest of where we are now. It's just, and the fireflies are flashing brightly one after another. It's really quite like sparklers on the 4th of July.
Thrown into confusion, Iraqi anti-aircraft gunners spray the sky over Baghdad, but nothing is there. The warplanes don't arrive for another 21 minutes.
I have a sense, Peter, that people are shooting towards the sky, and they are not aware or cannot see what they're shooting at.
I would guess, since they haven't heard any planes at all, that they're probably shooting at what conceivably could be a false alarm.
Whoa! Holy cow. That was a large airburst that we saw. It was filling the sky.
The first to slam into the Iraqi capital. Stealth fighters, invisible to enemy radar, strike targets with bombs guided by computers and lasers. The video cameras in the planes confirm hits.
Strong. Roger. Big steering. Okay. Altitude. Watch how much you turn it out. Okay.
As hundreds of planes bomb targets throughout Iraq and Kuwait, strategists worry about mid-air collisions. There aren't any that night or throughout the war.
Readable, over.
AWACS planes, with their high-powered radar, sort out the crowded skies. The deadly fighters and bombers use infrared technology, thermal sights, and laser targeting systems to inflict heavy damage under the protection of darkness.
If you had a half a brain, you'd quit before we do him any more damage. I would not be surprised at all if it ended quickly. The F1 that I blew up, when that thing blew up, it was a real long burst. It blew up. It was a huge fireball, and then you could just see it trickle, a lot of pieces trickling off to the ground, and you can see it hit the ground and burn on the ground for a while. So far, the casualty rates that I'm aware of have been remarkably low, and we're obviously very pleased about that.
Later, an Air Force official would say the orchestrated air attack stunned the Iraqis into submission. Leading the Allied forces, a bear of a man, H. Norman Schwarzkopf. Third-generation general who likes opera, the outdoors, and magic. It would take a magician to keep the Allied command intact, and a sense of humor.
Date talked about for a ground war?
What kind of dates? You mean going out on a date type thing, or what kind of date you have in mind?
His understanding of the Middle East goes back to age 12, when he lived in Iran with his father. His understanding of battle from the scars of 2 tours in Vietnam. This 4-star warrior also led the ground forces in the Grenada invasion. Now he commands all branches of the coalition forces, air, sea, and land.
This is not going to be another Vietnam. That we're going to get this thing wrapped up and we're going to get you all home as soon as we possibly can.
Haunted by Vietnam, the general and his staff devised a never-again strategy. In Vietnam, each division of the military conducted its own air campaign. This time, all air activity is coordinated under one command.
The president found morale high.
In Vietnam, President Johnson was involved in choosing enemy targets to strike. This time, that did not happen. In Nam, there was confusion over the battle plan. This time, there is clarity and simplicity. Pound the enemy from the air, mop up on the ground. In Vietnam, weaponry and terrain did not match. This time, the arsenal is nearly perfect. F-15's low-level, night-flying capability can destroy Scud launchers and air defenses. Stealths, $100 million Batwing fighters. They comprise fewer than 3% of Allied warplanes. They destroy more than 30% of all targets. The old reliables do their stuff as well. The A-10 Warthogs. A sleek look is not necessary for success. They kill tanks. But their 2,000-pound bombs kill, maim, and demoralize Iraqi troops hiding in desert bunkers. AWACS planes. The flying air traffic controllers coordinate 2,000 missions a night. The wild weasels can cause destruction in a number of ways. The Air Armada. The Apache helicopter with its speed and range overcomes concerns about its reliability in battle. At sea, carrier battle groups are launching pads for warplanes and cruise missiles. the missiles prove accurate 90% of the time. Battleships, such as the Missouri, blast the enemy with 16-inch guns. Range, 23 miles. And on the ground, hundreds of Abrams tanks wait for their moment. Mobility and night fighting capability give them a strong advantage over Iraqi tanks. War has never seen a high-tech force with such precision and accuracy. 8 bombers now accomplish what it took 500 to do in World War II.
Of all of the air sorties that land, we are rating 80% of them as having been affected.
After months of tough talk, Saddam's military response is feeble, mystifying. There is anti-aircraft fire. It is not effective.
They do have a lot of flag, but again, we have very high confidence in our stealth capability, and so far it's been very successful.
For us, it's kind of boring. We have not yet encountered any air threats.
We're well in control of the skies up there.
The few times Iraqi fighters took off, F-15s, the Allies' top guns, were waiting. Instead of fighting, 142 of Saddam's best planes fly to Iran to sit out the war. Troops and tanks don't engage. They stay in protected bunkers. Was this Saddam's scheme? Or is he forced to lay low? Military strategists seem unsure.
In terms of their capability, if they're saving their Sunday punch, they may be losing it even as we speak.
If it was difficult before the conflict started to try to assess Saddam Hussein's mental attitude and his thinking about all of these kinds of issues, is probably even more difficult now.
Iraq's only offense, Scud missiles. So inaccurate, they have little military effect. Instead, they become weapons of terror against civilian populations.
Into the shelters.
With every explosion, the question, does this one have chemicals?
We have said from the start that if attacked, we'll respond. We have been attacked. We will respond.
The Israelis remain silent. Washington asks them to. The Allied coalition needs no shocks. Americans, Europeans, Arabs armed against Arabs. A revengeful Jewish state could unravel the delicate bond President Bush worked so hard to create. And worse, the Israeli involvement could drown the entire region in war. And so, Israeli jets, while ready to scramble, remain on the ground. And the Allies remain dedicated to finding and destroying Scud missiles and their launchers. The United States moves in Patriot anti-missile systems to protect the Jewish state.
And we feel more safe here now.
Having the Patriots now in Israel, I think they have more reasons to be optimistic.
The Patriots are effective. But occasionally they hit the body of the Scud but miss the warhead, which destroys buildings, homes, and lives. Saddam tries other tactics, unorthodox, chilling, torching oil wells, and intentionally releasing more than 1 million gallons of oil into the Gulf.
There's no rationality to it. It looks desperate. It looks last gasp. It doesn't measure up to any military doctrine of any kind. But it's kind of sick.
This war should be stopped so we can go home. I do not agree on this war with Iraq.
And Saddam tries psychological propaganda.
I watched, along with all of you, that repulsive parade of American airmen on Iraqi television.
I think this war is crazy and should never have happened. I condemn this aggression against peaceful Iraq.
But I knew, as they read their prepared statements criticizing this country, that those were false words forced on them by their captors.
How the POWs are treated only strengthens Allied resolve. The daily pounding goes on. By day 27, the coalition has flown 65,000 sorties in Kuwait and Iraq, the most ever in war.
The Iraqis are having difficulty in supplying their troops with food and water, things as basic as that.
By the thousands, Iraqi soldiers die, and the rubble of war spreads across Iraq. Saddam Hussein appears unflinching.
Whoever has God on his side never gets defeated.
Saddam calls for jihad, an Arab holy war against the great Satan of the West. He urges all Muslims to terrorize the world. On the home front, fears become more noticeable.
We don't know what is coming, and we don't know what will happen. I think the word terrorism.
Due to increased security at the White House, all doors have been temporarily canceled. Thank you so much for calling.
Security at airports and on airlines is at an all-time high.
Ticketed passengers only will be allowed beyond security screening points. We regret this inconvenience, which is necessitated by the current world situation.
Saddam Hussein, take heed.
Lots of people are going to die, and it's not a war we should be involved in.
Another battle. Anti-war forces versus supporters.
There are causes worth by history.
We just want to get back alive.
Believe it or not, Iraqis are human beings, Kuwaitis are human beings.
Well, then why doesn't their leader act like a human being?
Of war, a major concern. Estimates of $30 billion for the first month. The White House points out, by agreement, other nations will pay most of the billions required in the defense of Saudi Arabia and the liberation of Kuwait.
The level of world cooperation and condemnation of Iraq is unprecedented.
But some members of Congress are doubtful.
Let this vote, though, Mr. President, not be a signal to our allies that this is a free ride. They had better do more.
The two economic giants of Germany and Japan have hardly spoken eloquently with their pocketbooks. I think this is a shame and a disgrace.
Missing in the early days of battle, a sense of horror.
Hell of a way to make a living, huh? How'd you like it?
Another day at the office.
For the first time in history, the world watches hours and hours of live coverage of a war. But it is like a Nintendo game. Clean, mechanical. Sensitive to the controversy, doubt, and bad press it received in Vietnam, the military refuses to provide body counts of enemy dead. Information is censored by the Americans, the British, the Saudis, the Israelis, and the Iraqis.
But are you saying we can't broadcast anymore? Are you closing us down?
No.
Well, that's what you're saying. You're telling us we can't broadcast here.
Well, I think it would be safe to say that we would be allowed to say that this is a... am I allowed to say this is a greater residential, be a residential area? I think, can I say that, sir? I'm going to ask our censor here right now. Can I say this is a residential area? Let's test the system right here. Can I? Yes, I can. I can tell you it is a residential area.
I never expected that kind of fear, but you have to overcome it.
The censorship could not filter out the human side of Cop G in Saudi Arabia.
How many rounds you got left? 15.
A small seaside town on the border with Kuwait, a ghost town, until Iraqi soldiers roll in and trigger the war's first skirmish on the ground. It is brief. It is bloody.
It's just like all hell broke loose. Didn't know whether I'd make it or not.
It was enough to scare me. I'd be lying if I didn't say dying didn't come across my mind.
It's a weird kind of pain. It's more psychological really than anything, because you're thinking, oh my God, I just got nailed. Pretty scary.
I'd say it's a wake up to reality.
U.S. Marines die, 7 by their own friendly fire. In Baghdad, tears and death as Allied bombs blow apart a building. The Iraqis claimed it was an air raid shelter.
What kind of coward people they are? I don't know. What can I say about them?
The Americans call it a sophisticated command and control bunker.
Within the last 2 weeks, this particular bunker became even more active as a command and control facility. I can't comment on the reports you're receiving from Baghdad, but no, we don't feel like we attacked the wrong bunker or that we made a mistake.
Many women and children are among those killed.
This is the most horrible, the most cruel thing I have ever witnessed.
They know damn well we're not targeting civilian targets, even though they're trying to make something out of it.
Images such as these shock and concern the world. But if Iraqis think this tragic sight will weaken Allied resolve, they are wrong. To some, clearly, the war can end quickly if ground troops move in. Thousands of Iraqi soldiers hiding in concrete reinforced bunkers can only be flushed out by foot soldiers and tanks. On February 9th, the military brains meet in Saudi Arabia to discuss when to start an all-out ground attack. Confidence is high. The Iraqis are wobbly.
We believe his Air Force has reached the point of ineffectiveness, that his air defenses have been significantly degraded, that his Navy is virtually non-existent, that production facilities for nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons are for the most part destroyed.
Still, Saddam appears confident, pledging victory. Ground forces get a taste of more action along the border.
If you like me, you be like, okay.
But most troops wait.
Sitting around waiting is the worst thing.
Gung-ho.
We're just gonna keep moving until we get to Baghdad. When we get there, we're gonna find a payphone and call home.
Scared.
We call it bad juju. you think about death a lot. So we try to think about it as little as possible.
Worried about Saddam's chemical weapons.
No matter what we face, it's going to be hard. It's going to be things we've never seen. It's going to be things that make people get on their knees and cry.
You're not going to be scared to death, I can tell you that. When we cross over that border, I'm going to be scared, but so is everybody else.
This ain't the movies. There's nothing glamorous about it, but I haven't even seen the worst of it yet.
Got an American flag in this pack right here we're going to raise in Kuwait.
All my letters I get, they say that everybody's behind us. And my family writes and says that they're proud of me. And that makes me positive.
We got an attack here, I guess you know that.
Number 2 is next. It is
now going back to Baghdad.
I need Amman, I need Saudi Arabia, I need the White House, I need the Pentagon.
Don't interrupt us. We got to get the point.
Who is it? Interrupt against Baghdad right now.
Baghdad continues to be its target.
This area is under threat of imminent attack.
Planes that are on the ramp are taking off. I can see a jet plane taking off right now. Heading up against the top.
Thinking about it right now, I think we should get it. Okay, guys, break it down. Out of here. Move.
Something is happening outside.
I need to be able to top the ground speeder.
The liberation of Kuwait has begun.
Holy cow. That was a large airburst that we saw. It was filling the sky.
It's kind of scary to think what damage we're going to be doing and how many lives we're going to be taking. It's kind of scary.
Now, if you're still with us, you're going to hear the bombs now. They are hitting the center of this city.
The F1 that I blew up, when that thing blew up, it was a real long burst. It blew up. It was a huge fireball, and then you could just see it trickle, a lot of pieces trickling out to the ground, and you can see it hit the ground and burn on the ground for a while.
Of all of the air sorties that went in, we are rating 80% of them as having been effective.
If he had a half a brain, he'd quit before we do him any more damage. I would not be surprised at all if it ended quickly.
We are resources
Said they heard 5 missiles land. I repeat, 5.
Right now, the last of the people we can see have scrambled into the shelter. They're still trying.
We heard several explosions. No way of knowing how far away. Well, I think it would be safe to say that we would be allowed to say that this is a... am I allowed to say this is a greater residential? This is be a residential area? I think... Can I say that, sir? I'm going to ask our senator here right now. Can I say this is a residential?
Family. I'm alive and well.
Ticketed passengers only will be allowed beyond the security screening points. We regret this inconvenience, which is necessitated by the current world situation.
This is the most horrible, the most cruel thing I have ever witnessed.
They know damn well we're not targeting civilian targets, even though they're trying to make something out of it.
Okay. Sitting around waiting is the worst thing.
You're not going to be scared to death. I can tell you that. When we cross over that border, I'm going to be scared, but so is everybody else.
We call it bad juju. You think about death a lot. So we try to think about it as little as possible.
No matter what we face, it's going to be hard. It's going to be things we've never seen. It's going to be things that make people get on their knees and cry.
Five months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined.
On the battlefield, no doubt about who is the victor. But on the diplomatic front, winning is less clear. The thunder of war is silenced by the themes of discourse. On both fronts, the stakes are high. For soldiers and Marines facing a ground war. For the politicians jostling for position, for influence, knowing that the victor will help shape the volatile oil-rich Middle East. February 9th, day 25 of the air war against Iraq. Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev professes support for the anti-Iraq coalition, but openly, he questions how the United States and its allies are fighting. Gorbachev cites growing civilian casualties and the twisted wreckage in some of Iraq's cities. He charges the war as going far beyond the United Nations goal of liberating Kuwait. And he launches a personal initiative to try to end the war with Saddam. But it is also intended to placate critics at home. The Soviet military, increasingly hardline, resents Moscow's lack of leadership in the Gulf crisis. And the Red Army generals don't like U.S. troops so close to the Soviet border. Many feel loyalty to Iraq, for years a good customer for Soviet-built weapons, such as the tanks that rumbled into Kuwait in early August. Equally important to the Kremlin, Gorbachev wants a high-profile role in the post-war Middle East. His timing is crucial. Arab members of the alliance are under pressure. In early February, 300,000 Moroccans demonstrate against the United States, a sign that the Muslim world is stirring against the ground war. And Jordan's King Hussein drops all pretense of neutrality. With a majority of his nation Palestinian and passionate supporters of Saddam, the king joins the anti-American chorus. In a televised speech to his nation, the king refers to brotherly Iraq standing up to outside domination.
It becomes easy to realize that this war is a war against all Arabs and Muslims, not only against Iraq.
February 11th, Gorbachev sends Yevgeny Primakov to Iraq to broker a deal with Saddam Hussein. Primakov is one of the Kremlin's top experts in the Middle East. He speaks Arabic, and he has known Saddam for more than 20 years. His first night in Baghdad is not quiet. He hears and feels the sound, the fury of Allied bombs as the air war intensifies. The next day, he walks the lanes of war, touring the city. For the public, photo opportunities of Gorbachev's man in the rubble underscore Soviet concerns. Privately, Primakov meets with Saddam Hussein. His message is simple: get out of Kuwait. 3 days later, this shocker. Radio Baghdad announces to the war-pounded citizens of Iraq and an anxious world the Iraqi government's interest in a political solution. The statement never mentions Kuwait. It does use the word withdrawal for the first time. People in Baghdad cannot hold back their euphoria. Skepticism is the reaction of U.S. ground troops in Saudi Arabia.
Until they physically pull out, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing.
As Saddam's conditions for peace are analyzed, the chance for avoiding a bloody ground war seems to disappear. Iraq's decision on withdrawal hinges on what diplomats call linkage. In this case, a demand that Israel also withdraw from Arab land it occupies, a demand to which the United States has consistently said no. Iraq also wants the United Nations economic and military sanctions lifted, and Saddam insists he will not pay Kuwait for war damages. The Allies' response? No deal.
Regrettably, the Iraq statement now appears to be a cruel hoax.
Iraq's ambassador to the United Nations tries to finesse the situation with semantics.
You shouldn't use the word condition, we shouldn't use the word linkage. Sometimes we become captive of our own misunderstanding, our own misconceptions. Here you have all legitimate issues. Let us call them issues.
No deal.
But there's another way for the bloodshed to stop, and that is for the Iraqi military and the Iraqi people to take matters into their own hands, to force Saddam Hussein, the dictator, to step aside.
February 17th. The Soviets try again. Iraq's foreign minister, Tariq Aziz, arrives in Moscow to speak with, quote, our Soviet friends. The next day, he meets with Gorbachev for several hours, and he returns to Iraq with a new Soviet peace plan. The details are not made public, but the Kremlin sends a 2.5-page summary of the proposal to the White House. President Bush says it has too many strings attached, but he does not reject it outright.
It falls well short of what would be required, and I would leave it right there for now.
Does that mean we're going to have a ground war?
That means I'm going to leave it right there for now.
2 days later, February 21st, Iraq's foreign minister is back in Moscow with a message from Saddam Hussein. At 2:40 a.m., a spokesman for Gorbachev rushes to tell waiting reporters that Saddam has accepted the Soviet peace plan.
So I do think that I can say a very good morning.
The plan calls for Iraq's full and unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait. It does not specify a timetable, and it apparently absolves Iraq from paying war reparations. But there is no linkage to the Palestinian issue, a major concession by Iraq.
I do think that we can give some applause here.
President Bush is not cheering. In a meeting with his inner circle of advisors, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell, suggests setting a deadline for Saddam to withdraw. The United States is looking for an opening to start the ground war, to smash Saddam's military machine and eliminate his threat to the region. Bombing of the Iraqi troops in and around Kuwait has escalated. 3,000 Allied sorties a day. U.S. officials now say Iraq's army is on the verge of collapse. Bracing for the worst, Iraq begins to destroy Kuwait's economy, systematically burning and blowing up hundreds of oil wells. A scorched earth policy, the president calls it. For miles, the sky is black. Friday, February 22nd. President Bush and the Allies have had enough.
The coalition will give Saddam Hussein until noon Saturday to do what he must do. Begin his immediate and unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait.
Saddam has two choices: political humiliation if he complies, military defeat if he does not. Presidents Bush and Gorbachev talked by phone. The past few days have been cordial, with Bush reportedly calling his Soviet counterpart Mick, and Gorbachev signing off in American slang, "Okay, goodbye." Publicly, the White House says it appreciates the useful efforts of the Soviet Union. But the Soviets will not be permitted a victory in the end game. It's clear, relations between the two countries have turned from the idealism of a new world order to the politics of pragmatism. As the deadline in the desert approaches, Saddam responds by firing another Scud missile into Israel. It is the 16th attack on the Jewish state. At noon, the hour of deadline, Baghdad is rocked by a thunderous Allied bombing run.
Did expire. As the ultimatum did expire, in fact, there was a huge explosion in the hotel area. We could see the fireballs clearly from the garden of the hotel where we are standing. The air raid alert that the air raid.
Nearly a third of Iraq's heavy weapons already have been destroyed. Many Iraqi troops have been cut off from food and supplies. They are facing the most powerful military force ever assembled. Still, Radio Baghdad tells them to stand firm. The angels are at your shoulders.
The liberation of Kuwait has now entered a final phase. I have complete confidence in the ability of the coalition forces swiftly and decisively to accomplish their mission.
Who can define war? A general might think of war as a contest of will and might, a campaign to win or lose, a fight for a cause, oil, land, liberty. But in the trenches, watching the sunset, bracing for the ground battle to begin, the foot soldier will tell you what war is really about. War is about survival. February 23rd, Saturday shadows spread across the desert. Darkness encroaches. A soldier watches, eyes wide, anxious. Soon it will be night. Soon it will be tomorrow.
When we get to the last few breaches, I think we're going to run into a lot of stuff nobody's seen before. It's going to shock a bunch of people. I don't know what it'll be like.
There are two ways to look at war. From the bottom up,
I apologize for the busy nature of this chart, but I think it's
or the top down. Both views are true. Both are part of war's reality.
This goes back to 7 August.
From where he stands, General Norman Schwarzkopf sees open terrain, tempting terrain, stretching away to the west, beyond Kuwait, and the dug-in tanks of Saddam Hussein. Just across the Saudi border, Iraq. Far away, on the desert's western rim, the sun sprays the last fire of dusk on the sand. Before dawn, the war would begin. Out of darkness, new fires would light the sky. For remnants of Iraq's battered army, fires of destruction. For Kuwait, hopeful fires of liberation. Military historians will add this battle to the lessons and the mistakes of war. Like the lesson of General Stonewall Jackson. Never fight against heavy odds if by any possible maneuvering you can hurl your whole force on the weakest part of your enemy. General Norman Schwarzkopf knows his lessons well. This would be one of history's battles to change the way wars are won. Like the Battle of Agincourt. In 1415, French knights encased in steel armor and on horseback were cut down like grass by English bowmen. They died under a rain of arrows. Air superiority. Now, more than 500 years later, Iraqi soldiers in their tanks are destroyed by a powerful new rain of weapons from the sky. Yet even at Agincourt, there was uncertainty among the English bowmen around their fires the night before the battle. Uncertainty recounted in Shakespeare's lines from Henry V. O God of battles, steel my soldiers' hearts, possess them not with fear.
I'm terribly proud to be your Commander-in-Chief. I'm as proud as I can be to be leading outstanding soldiers like the brave Rifles. But what's more important is your country's proud of you, and the world is proud of you, and you need to be proud of yourself. We've had a long, hard look at the Iraqi Army. And I want to tell you, there's no question about the fact that you are better trained, you're better equipped, you're better led. Believe it or not, in spite of MREs, you're better fed. Okay? But most of all, you're a hell of a lot tougher than they are. And if you've got to go against them, there's no doubt in my mind what the outcome's going to be. Good luck all.
This general loves his men, and they love him.
One more time, I think you're doing a great job. Thank you, Bart. I appreciate it. That means a lot to me.
The general also has a message for he who confronts, Saddam Hussein.
How's that?
These fighters know one thing. There are no guarantees. Some military experts predict heavy Allied casualties, as many as 45,000.
Like I said, all you gotta do is pray to God and you need to do this, just like me and my homeboys do. Pray all day long.
This is all good luck we need right here. State flag and my son.
There are prayers. There are special things sent from home. By this soldier's wife, symbolically all her love sewn up in a satin heart.
And when ye come, and all the world's a-dying, and I am dead, as dead I will be.
The hour of battle draws near. Time for strength and stubborn resolve. And yet, in the heart of each and every Allied soldier stationed in the desert, the yearning to return home alive. It is time to treasure sweet memories and old songs.
And I shall hear no song you dread of me, and all my grave will once sweeter be. Now you will tell me that you love me. Oh, that he would. Oh, that he would. I love you so.
Sunday morning. Rain lashes the desert. Black clouds from burning oil wells rise to meet thunder. The time has come for a desert storm.
At 0400 hours local this morning, coalition forces began a major ground, naval, and air offensive to eject Iraqi forces from Kuwait.
After months of training and weeks of sparring, the slugging match is on. The Allied ground attack begins with artillery barrages. Shells come in from far behind the front lines. Out on the Gulf, Navy guns belch death on Iraqi troop positions along the coast of Kuwait. Suddenly, after all the waiting, there's action, speed, violence.
Bit of excitement. Sorry.
Behind this wall of thunder is the grand deception. General Norman Schwarzkopf, looking across the Saudi border, saw opportunity. But to take it, he would need secrecy, stealth, and tactical sleight of hand. Dawn, Sunday, Gulf time. U.S. Marines swing into a carefully rehearsed maneuver. The invasion of Kuwait by sea. 18,000 Marines deploy for an amphibious invasion. An estimated 150,000 Iraqi troops are dug in along the Kuwaiti coast. They sit waiting for the Marines. Already, the Iraqis are pinned to the mat, tied down in place by a threat. The threat of an attack that never comes. It is Act 1 in the Grand Deception, a charade by the general to fool the enemy and, in the process, most of the news media. sleight of hand. While the right hand is doing one thing by the sea, the left hand is a swinging fist. As the guns boom and the shell casings fly, the general's plan is unfolding. The American Army's new method. They call it air-land. Control the air, move fast on the ground. Velocity, mobility, and surprise, crucial elements. More than 300 miles west of the Persian Gulf, the French 6th Armored Division, reinforced by a brigade from the 82nd Airborne Division, launches an attack to protect the Allied left flank. They punch 60 miles into southern Iraq to take Al-Saman. They also take many prisoners. Very soon, almost everywhere on the battlefront, scenes like these are repeated. First, hundreds. Let's go! Then thousands of Saddam's beaten and demoralized soldiers surrender to the French, to the Saudis, to the Americans, even to CNN and others in the news media.
Kneel down. Get out.
The sharp fight on the far left flank is the first move by coalition forces in a massive end run. Other Allied forces, mechanized infantry and tank units, move north after a wide swing to the west, outflanking Saddam's field fortifications in Kuwait. Blinded by airstrikes and faked out by the Marines with their sea attack that never came, most of Iraq's army is caught flat-footed, looking in the wrong direction.
Afternoon, thank you for coming.
General Schwarzkopf is permitted to lift the news blackout imposed by the Secretary of Defense. Casualties are light, he announces, and thus far, the attack has been a dramatic success.
10 hours into this ground offensive, more than 5,500 prisoners have been captured. And we received reports of many hundreds more north of our positions with white surrender flags.
You say the opposition is light. Is this because you have avoided a frontal confrontation with them? Are you going around or over, and is that why there's little opposition?
We're going to go around, over, through, on top, underneath, and any other...
Make no mistake, we will prevail. Kuwait will soon be free, and America's men and women in uniform will return home to the thanks and respect of a grateful nation.
Monday, February 25th, Gulf time. A force consisting of 2 U.S. divisions already has advanced into Iraq. Far north of the Saudi border, the 101st Air Assault Division and the 24th Mechanized Infantry Division jump off with the rest of the team in General Schwarzkopf's Hail Mary play, a takeoff on the old offensive football strategy. Everybody goes long.
We've been sitting in the desert for almost 6 months. And there's a lot of ticked-off soldiers out there. I feel sorry for anybody who gets in our way.
Don't really want to see anybody get hurt. Wish Saddam would pull out. But if he don't, we'll just knock him back to the Stone Age.
The 101st and the 24th continue driving north toward the Euphrates River, running ahead of schedule. Resistance is light, but the weather is a problem.
I thought I'd landed in hell.
Remind me of the film footage I saw of the guys going into the rice paddies of Vietnam. There's just nothing but a sea of mud.
Many Allied troops advance in full chemical protective gear, fearful that Saddam might order a last-ditch gas attack. Troops with the 2nd Marine Division driving toward Kuwait City take no chances, even though the blustering wind could blow the gas back on the Iraqi defenders. Soon, the 101st Airborne and the 24th Mechanized barrel into the Tigris-Euphrates Valley. By now, whole battalions of Iraqi defenders are surrendering. For them, the war is ending with a bus trip and a candy bar. But for Iraqis still fighting, the worst is ahead. In a matter of hours, they will be trapped. The 24th Mechanized Division wheels to the east. Racing toward Basra in southeastern Iraq, they block or destroy all bridges and crossing points along the Euphrates River. Slowly, sluggishly, Saddam's Republican Guard begins to respond, but too late. Bridges at Basra are down. Retreat is cut off. Saddam's elite troops and indeed all his forces south of the Euphrates are surrounded.
It was in a blinding dust storm. Visibility is about 50 feet. So we came out into the open with 4 battalions on line and caught them totally by surprise.
Disaster for Saddam, but for the Allies, it answers a soldier's prayer on the eve of battle.
I was asking of God simply that for success, I pray for our soldiers and all the people within our side. I also pray for the Iraqi soldiers too.
And yet, Saddam's toughest troops have not been confronted. Surrounded, the Republican Guard has avoided the taste of battle. Hardened by 8 years of war with Iran, they are veterans. Has it all been just too easy?
Saddam's most recent speech is an outrage. He is not withdrawing. His defeated forces are retreating. He is trying to claim victory in the midst of a rout. And he is not voluntarily giving up Kuwait.
February 26th, Gulf time. It is well to know the enemy. Advancing Allied forces have yet to meet the Republican Guard. In August, the Guard led Saddam's invasion of Kuwait. Now it occupies reserve positions just over the Kuwaiti border in southern Iraq, near Basra. Advancing coalition forces may face counterattack by the Republican Guard, using tanks, massive artillery barrages, and perhaps poison gas. General Schwarzkopf describes it as the nightmare scenario.
It's coming down.
Another nightmare. After success against Scud missile attacks, one slips through the Patriot defense system the previous night. A U.S. barracks near Tehran destroyed. 28 Americans killed, 98 wounded.
That camera! Get away with that camera, sir.
But the Iraqis are suffering a nightmare of their own. 5 weeks relentless bombing by the Allies. Those in forward units are now surrendering by the thousands.
Well, there was a group that had nothing but 3 dates in their pocket and non-potable water in their canteen. And they were scared, and they were broken, and, you know, they just wanted an end to it.
Plus, the U.S. Army 7th Corps still has a few surprises for Saddam and his generals. With his enemy blinded, Schwarzkopf sent the 7th Corps tiptoeing to the left. He moved it from near the Persian Gulf to join other units assembling west of Kuwait. Now on day 3 of the ground war, the 7th Corps hammers toward Basra and its showdown with the Republican Guard. The way is clear, partly due to the largest helicopter operation in military history. Another Schwarzkopf surprise. On the first day of the ground offensive, 300 helicopters land Special Forces units and supplies behind enemy lines, more than 50 miles inside Iraq. American men and women pilot the choppers on this perilous mission. Major Marie Rossi has but a few days left before she would be killed in an accidental crash.
I think if you talk to women who are professionally in the military, we see ourselves as soldiers. We don't really put it into perspective as men versus women. And what I'm doing is no greater or no less than the man who's flying next to me or the men that are flying ahead of me. Personally, as an aviator and as a soldier, this is the moment that everybody trains for, that I've trained for, so, you know, I feel ready to meet a challenge. I don't necessarily personally like it. You know, if I had the opportunity that they called a ceasefire tomorrow, that would be great. You know we can do what we have to do. Just as soon see it not have to be done.
But what's the word from Kuwait? Disturbing news causes General Schwarzkopf to step up the timetable.
I don't think there's any question about the fact that there was a very, very large number of young Kuwaitis, males, taken out of that city within the last week or two. But that pales to insignificance compared to the absolutely unspeakable atrocities that occurred in Kuwait in the last week. They're not a part of the same human race, the people that did that the rest of us are. I've got to pray that that's the case.
100 hours. A quick campaign, but not quick enough, nor clean enough to avoid the scourge of war. As the Allies get closer to the capital, scenes of destruction and stories of atrocities.
They use two of these. They put them this side and pull it harder.
Oh.
Got mines like this, the PMN. Very simple mine. The Soviets had used this in Afghanistan. 3 to 5 pounds of pressure, it blows your foot off.
To the south, Arabs, Egyptians, and Americans move through a network of minefields, advancing on Kuwait City. Their mission? To liberate the capital.
Fire!
They are the rescuers of men and women and their children. Spearheading the coalition advance, the U.S. 1st and 2nd Marine Divisions, backed by the Army's Tiger Brigade.
It seems as if it's a mass retreat at this point. We were up along the front lines yesterday, about 30 miles southern Kuwait. We saw artillery fire coming at us from the Iraqi positions, about half a mile away from where we were, but it was not a fierce bombardment, and the Saudi soldiers in our territory did not seem overly concerned about it.
Left of the Marines in western Kuwait, 2 Egyptian divisions and a Syrian division. To the right of the Marines, coming up the coastline, a task force of Kuwaitis. With them, their Saudi Arabian allies. Allied forces close in. The battle for Kuwait City is joined. It is not much of a battle.
The breach was going to go no matter what, and fortunately it went without any casualties.
A lot of surprise because there wasn't a whole lot of resistance, and I just kind of give that nothing but the glory of God, because this is nothing short of a miracle that we didn't run into any more than we did.
Suddenly, Saddam Hussein orders his forces in Kuwait to withdraw, but there is a problem. The order reads, "Withdraw in an orderly fashion." Response from the White House is negative.
Saddam's most recent speech is an outrage. He is not withdrawing. His defeated forces are retreating. He is trying to claim victory in the midst of a rout.
Defense Secretary Cheney spells it out. Iraqi soldiers will not be permitted to withdraw as military units. Cheney says any who try it will be treated, in his words, according to the rules of war. In other words, they will be pounded. Allied warplanes catch retreating Iraqis in a massive traffic jam. They bomb them north of Kuwait City on the road to Basra. More than 1,500 vehicles are smashed and burned, including tanks, trucks, private cars, and even ambulances. In the aftermath, some of the Gulf War's most terrible scenes of destruction. Hours later, victory in Kuwait City. By morning, Marines have regained control of the U.S. Embassy.
President Bush has announced that Allied combat operations are being suspended as of now.
It's a good day. Great day. It's over. Finally.
The scene is somber. Rubble, fires. But the sun will rise on a day of celebration.
As far as Saddam Hussein being a great military strategist, he is neither a strategist, nor is he schooled in the operational art, nor is he a tactician, nor is he a general, nor is he as a soldier. Other than that, he's a great military man. I want you to know that.
Wednesday, February 27th, Gulf time. In Kuwait City, jubilant citizens raise their flag over the central square. Almost everywhere, victory is evident.
We're free, man. We're free. It took us the Marines, hoorah, and we kicked the Iraqis out of Kuwait. And if they want more, the Marines are ready for more. And hoorah!
Joy is unrestrained. It is a celebration of survival, of freedom, of peace. Kuwaiti soldiers offer prayers of thanks, but the fighting is not over. Pockets of resistance are still being cleaned out by Kuwaiti special forces.
They did not have time to run, and when they were withdrawn, they kind of ran into each other across the road somewhere. Their vehicles were shot up. They met up. They tried to look up for an empty house, and that's where they went into an empty house, and they took it over, and they just started to survive and try to ride this on through, but it didn't last long, and obviously this is what's happening now.
We lost our freedom the day he walked in this country, and we've been living in fear. Each family either has one member that's been tortured, one has been killed, especially in the past week, and they started rounding out people from all the areas here, around here, knocking at doors, walking into houses. They still have one or two of their family that are still either in Baghdad. They don't know what happened to them, whether they've been killed.
As Kuwaitis recall the Iraqi invasion of last August, this day of liberation is laced with bad memories.
I know a friend of mine, she was killed. I don't know, terrible. They wrote her name on a piece of paper, and they brought a pen, put the name on her skin with the pen.
They pinned her name onto her body?
On the skin, yeah, on her body.
And killed her?
Yeah.
There was some burns in the eyes, the white ones, okay? And, you know, 2 shots, we think that it was 2 shots here, okay, in the front of the head. And he was without nails for, you know, his hands and his feet.
She was very angry, she was very upset. She said, please give me an injection, do something, I want to die. I don't want to live after this day.
And there are stories of Iraqi soldiers in panic, struggling to escape.
I haven't heard such traffic jams and hooting of horns since before the occupation. They were really bumper to bumper, getting the hell out of here. And we saw their helmets thrown in the street today and things that they had stolen, that they had left behind, just to get out of here as fast as they could.
Shortly before noon, U.S. Marines shoot it out with Iraqis attempting to hold Kuwait airport. The Marines win. North of Kuwait, the Republican Guard is looking for an escape route to Baghdad. Their only chance is the land bridge at Nasiriyah, to the west, nearly 160 miles away. They never make it. Just 50 miles west of Basra, the 7th Corps cuts them off. Apache helicopters and Warthog aircraft join American tanks in a battle with tanks of the Republican Guard. The Iraqi tanks are outnumbered and outgunned. Allied firepower destroys more than 500 enemy tanks. The Republican Guard is smashed. For Saddam's finest, it is worse than defeat. It is a rout. Saddam Hussein would claim victory, but the war's reality is inescapable. Nothing is left of his army but stragglers and shattered equipment. Very soon, President Bush would have a decision to make.
7 months ago, America and the world drew a line in the sand. We declared that the aggression against Kuwait would not stand. And tonight, America and the world have kept their word.
Thursday morning, February 28th, Gulf time. President Bush is reviewing reports from the battlefront. The 7th Corps is mopping up after its clash with the Republican Guard. The Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff predict victory within hours. Today is the day. Throughout Kuwait and in southern Iraq, there is no question Saddam is defeated.
I'm very thankful for the fact that the President of the United States has allowed the United States military and the coalition military to fight this war exactly as it should have been fought. And the President, in every case, has taken our guidance and our recommendations to heart and has acted superbly as the Commander-in-Chief of the United States.
President Bush decides to declare a conditional ceasefire. Allied guns will stop firing at midnight for the first time in 100 hours.
Kuwait is liberated. Iraq's army is defeated. Our military objectives are met. Kuwait is once more in the hands of Kuwaitis in control of their own destiny. We share in their joy, a joy tempered only by our compassion for their ordeal.
The Gulf War is a stunning victory, and yet somehow it does not equate with the clean-cut victory of World War II. This victory is not complete. To reporters, the president's manner seems strangely subdued.
I know these are serious topics, but I'm struck by how somber you feel. You seem, at least here. And I was wondering, aren't these great days? Is this the highlight of your life?
Well, you know, to be very honest with you, I haven't yet felt this wonderfully euphoric feeling that many of the American people feel. And I'm beginning to. I feel much better about it today than I did yesterday. But I think it's that I want to see an end.
Diplomats at the United Nations still have work to do. Spurred on by the United States, the UN Security Council will approve a new resolution requiring Iraq to renounce any claim to Kuwait, to return stolen property, and to release all prisoners of war. All 12 of the UN's previous resolutions regarding the invasion are reaffirmed as well, including authorization of the use of force against Iraq. But Saddam Hussein is still in power. Are terms of the temporary ceasefire too lenient? Has a permanent peace been achieved? Or is the world merely witnessing another fragile truce in the violent and unpredictable Middle East? For now, these questions are lost in the celebration of victory.
We're coming home now, proud, confident, heads high. There is much that we must do, at home and abroad, and we will do it. We are Americans. May God bless this great nation, the United States of America. Thank you all very much.
Finally, the guns fall silent. Even amid the horror of war's aftermath, the rubble, the sky blackened by burning oil, human beings could dare to dream again about peace. For the fighting men and women, it was now safe to relax, okay to laugh, almost time to go home. What was this instant, this tick of the clock at the end of 100 hours of combat? The war was over. The storm had passed. It was victory for one side, defeat for the other.
I just want a big hug. That's all I want for right now.
I can't laugh or cry, and when I see him, I'll probably do both.
Our armed forces fought with honor and valor, and as president, I can report to the nation, aggression is defeated, the war is over. The America we saw in Desert Storm was first-class talent.
You families and ladies are great. God bless you.
In a very real sense, this victory belongs to them.
All right. Welcome home. Hey. Welcome home, buddy.
Hey, thanks, Al.
Here we go.
All right. Thank you.
Here, hold your flag. Say hi. Say hi. Hi, Daddy.
We're coming home now. Proud, confident, heads high.
We weren't really expecting all the support from the Americans, and this is truly incredible. It really is.
You don't have to wear a uniform to be a war hero. Mothers and fathers, sisters, brothers, children, neighbors, friends. And while you servicemen and women fought on distant sands, those you left behind talked and prayed, and I know that every whispered prayer somehow echoed in the hearts of the fighters far away.
He's waiting, he's dying. I know. Come on. Careful. Okay, you got her? Okay. Open her face and don't take
Which one's the head?
The head's up this way here. Oh, you got some news so she can get up. Okay? Okay, you about ready?
Yeah.
There you go.
Beautiful. Come here, Mom. I love you.
United we'll stand, divided we'll fall. You see the risk that they're taking, well, it's to serve us all. So wave your flag to America and show them that we care. Till the storm is finally over, let them always be in our prayers. So let us
A lot of the guys that are back home now are the guys that got here first, so they deserve to be home now. They spent a lot more time here than we did, so I guess we gotta do what we gotta do.
I'm a little jealous, but my time will come. The important thing is that I am going home soon.
It makes us feel good over here, knowing that people back home, they do care about us, and looking forward to going back.
First thing I will do when I get home is give my wife a big hug. I think she deserves it, and myself also.
So let us pray for our soldiers, that God will bring them safely home. Just let us pray for all our soldiers, that God will bring them safely home.